Hey guys, it's reading day, and today's book is Bram Stoker's Dracula. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Happy Sunday, everybody. I hope you all had a great weekend. I know I did. Thanks to my producer. Thank you for dinner, producer. I really appreciate it. Took me to dinner tonight. Junk food, but hey, whatever works. It is hot. It is really hot. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. I'm also the owner of the California Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We're 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you think you have a paranormal thing going, we can help you. We may be able to help you. In the case that we can't get you right away, because California is a huge state, and that's something people don't realize, we do have psychics on staff who can do a remote reading on your location and take it from there. And if there is something, if they think there's something paranormal going on, they can usually settle the energy down until we can get out there. But it usually doesn't take us more than a few days to get out there. Woo, like I said, it's hot. And just walking around my house, it's the only room I have AC, is in the studio, as you can hear in the background. And just walking around my house to check on my dogs and stuff, I mean, the sweat's just pouring off. Anyway, welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're watching from Facebook, and a lot of you are, and you haven't done so already, please hit that follow button, especially if you like what you see here today. I'd really appreciate it. Also, chat amongst yourself in the chat room. And let me know. Show me some love. Give me some thumbs up. Give me some happy hearts, smiley faces, things like that. Because what that does is that puts us higher on the FYP list for Facebook. FYP, well, when you're going down your Facebook page and you see that stuff come up in the middle, suggested friends or suggested pages, that's what that is. So what happens when you just say you like us, or wow, that came off. That shouldn't have done that either. Could be one of those days. What happens, when you say you like us and things like that, that puts us higher in the For You page, and that's what that is. Same thing over at YouTube. We have more than 1,000 videos sitting over at YouTube. Excuse me, my throat. And they're not all paranormal. There are a lot of different topics because I'm a journalist, photojournalist, so I like to change it up a bit. So I have different files that I'm setting up on the different topics. So if you like cryptids, you can go into the cryptid file. If you like being Nancy Matt, she's got her own file. So you can pick and choose pretty much what you want to see and hear. Okay. Also, same thing for YouTube. If you haven't subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Always looking for subscribers. And please leave us a thumbs up, or just show us that you like us, that kind of thing. And chat amongst yourselves in the chat room today. It's all good. I'll be reading those as I'm reading, so it's not like I'm going to ignore you or anything like that. So please chat amongst yourselves in the chat room. While we started reading, we finished off the werewolf book. I think it was, Thursday? Excuse me, my allergies, everything's hit at once. We finished off the werewolf book. And then I wasn't sure where I was going to go, obviously, so then I decided to start Bram Stoker's Dracula, and we did. And for those of you just coming in to Bram Stoker's Dracula today, don't feel bad. We're always through the first chapter, and the second chapter we just got to the castle, and he's out, and Harker's outside waiting to go to the castle. So that's where we're starting as chapter 2. I'll read for about an hour today, and hopefully my throat mellows out. I just had this thing set to reset itself, so let's see if it comes back where I left it. No, it's not even where I left off. Okay, hang on, let me see what's going on here. Okay. For some reason it shut off. I don't know if it's lack of not doing things, sitting it down, I didn't like it, or... Okay, so like I said, Jonathan Harker has just gotten to Dracula's castle, and we're in chapter 2, so that's where we're starting. So it's 6:08 now, 6:08 p.m. Pacific. I will end at 7:08 p.m. Pacific reading. So welcome. I hope you enjoy it. Like my intro says, kick off your shoes, put your slippers on, grab a coffee, eat your dinner, do whatever, and just enjoy this evening. This is a way to get into your work week. For some of you are already in the work week, especially in Australia and RSS feed. Alrighty, so here we go. Jonathan Harker's Journal continued, Chapter 2. Excuse me. Alright. See, my allergies. I'm sorry to snort in your ears. Jeez, okay. It's going to be like that, huh? But my allergies are so bad right now. It is so hot outside. It is just so hot. And inside, too. Okay. Jonathan Harker's Journal, Chapter 2. Continue. 5 May. I must have been asleep, or certainly, if I had been fully awake, I must have noticed the approach of such a remarkable place. In the gloom, the courtyard looked a considerable size, and, as several dark ways led from it, under great round arches, it perhaps seemed bigger than it really is. I have not yet been able to see it by daylight. When the caleche stopped, the driver jumped down and held out his hand to assist me to alight. Again, I could not but notice his prodigious strength. His hand actually seemed like a steel vice that could have crushed mine if he had chosen. Then he took out my traps and placed them on the ground beside me as I stood close to a great door, old and studded with large iron nails, and set in the projecting doorway of massive stone. I could see even in the dim light that the stone was massively carved, but that the carving had been much worn by time and weather. As I stood, the driver jumped again into his seat and shook the reins. The horses started forward, and trap and all disappeared down one of the dark openings. I stood in silence where I was, for I did not know what to do. Of bell or knocker there was no sign. Through these frowning walls and dark window openings it was not likely that my voice could penetrate. The time I waited seemed endless, and I felt doubts and fears crowding upon me. What sort of place had I come to, and among what kind of people? What sort of grim adventure was it on which I had embarked? Was this customary incident in the life of a solicitor's clerk sent out to explain the purchase of a London estate to a foreigner? Solicitor's clerk. Mine would not be like that. Solicitor, for just before leaving London, I got word that my examination was successful, and I am now a full-blown solicitor. I began to rub my eyes and pinch myself to see if I were awake. It all seemed like a horrible nightmare to me, and I expected that I should suddenly awake and find myself at home, with the dawn struggling in through the windows, as I had now and again felt in the morning after a day of overwork. But my flesh answered the pinching test, and my eyes were not to be deceived. I was indeed awake and among the Carpathians. All I could do now was to be patient and to wait the coming of the morning. Just as I had come to this conclusion, I heard a heavy step approaching behind the great door, and saw through the chinks the gleam of a coming light. Then there was the sound of rattling chains and the clanking of massive bolts drawn back. A key was turned with a loud grating noise of long disuse, and the great door swung back. Within stood a tall old man, clean-shaven, save for a long white mustache, and clad in black from head to foot, without a single speck of color about him anywhere. He held in his hand an antique silver lamp, in which the flame burned without chimney or globe of any kind, throwing long quivering shadows as it flickered in the draught of the open door. The old man motioned me in with his right hand with a courtly gesture, saying in excellent English, but with a strange intonation, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely, and of your own will." He made no motion of stepping to meet me, but stood like a statue, as though his gesture of welcome had fixed him into stone. The instant, however, that I had stepped over the threshold, he moved impulsively forward, and holding out his hand, grasped mine with a strength which made me wince, an effect which was not lessened by the fact that it seemed as cold as ice, more like the hand of a dead than a living man. Again he said, "Welcome to my house. Come freely, go safely, and leave something of the happiness you bring." The strength of the handshake was so much akin to that which I had noticed in the driver, whose face I had not seen, that for a moment I doubted if it were not the same person to whom I was speaking. So to make sure, I said interrogatively, "Count Dracula?" He bowed in a courtly way as he replied, "I am Dracula, and I bid you welcome, Mr. Harker, to my house. Come in. The night air is chill, and you must need to eat and rest." As he was speaking, he put the lamp on a bracket on the wall, and stepping out, took my luggage. He had carried it in before I could forestall him. I protested, but he insisted. Nay, sir, you are my guest. It is late, and my people are not available. Let me see to your comfort, myself. He insisted on carrying my traps along the passage, and then up a great winding stair, and along another great passage, on whose stone floor our steps rang heavily. At the end of this, he threw open a heavy door, and I rejoiced to see within a well-lit room, in which a table was spread for supper, and on whose mighty hearth a great fire of logs, freshly replenished, flamed and flared. The Count halted, putting down my bags, closed the door, and crossing the room, opened another door, which led into a small octagonal room, lit by a single lamp, and seemingly without a window of any sort. Passing through this, he opened another door, and motioned me to enter. It was a welcome sight, for here was a great bedroom, well lighted and warmed with another log fire. Also, added to, but lately, for the top logs were fresh, which sent a hollow roar up the wide chimney. The Count himself left my luggage inside and withdrew, saying, before he closed the door, "You will need, after your journey, to refresh yourself by making your toilet. I trust you will find all you wish. When you are ready, come into the other room, where you will find your supper prepared." The light and warmth, and the Count's courteous welcome seemed to have dissipated all my doubts and fears. Having then reached my normal state, I discovered that I was half famished with hunger. So making a hasty toilet, I went into the other room. I found supper already laid out. My host, who stood on one side of the great fireplace, leaning against the stonework, made a graceful wave of his hand to the table, and said, "I pray you, be seated, and sup how you please. You will, I trust, excuse me that I do not join you, but I have dined already, and I do not sup." I handed to him the sealed letter which Mr. Hawkins had entrusted to me. He opened it and read it gravely. Then, with a charming smile, he handed it to me to read. One passage of it, at least, gave me a thrill of pleasure. "I must regret that an attack of gout, from which malady I am a constant sufferer, forbids absolutely any traveling on my part for some time to come. But I am happy to say I can send a sufficient substitute, one in whom I have every possible confidence. He is a young man, full of energy and talent in his own way, and of a very faithful disposition. He is discreet and silent, and has grown into manhood in my service. He shall be ready to attend on you when you will during his stay, and shall take your instructions in all matters." The Count himself came forward and took off the cover of a dish, and I fell to it at once on an excellent roast chicken. This, with some cheese and a salad and a bottle of old Tokay, of which I had 2 glasses, was my supper. During the time I was eating it, the Count asked me many questions as to my journey, and I told him by degrees all I had experienced. By this time, I had finished my supper, and by my host's desire, had drawn up a chair by the fire and begun to smoke a cigar, which he offered me, at the same time excusing himself that he did not smoke. I now had an opportunity of observing him, and found him of a very marked physical type. His face was very strong, aquiline, with high bridge of the thin nose and a strangely arched nostrils, with lofty domed forehead, and hair growing scantily round the temples, but profusely elsewhere. His eyebrows were very massive, almost meeting over the nose, and with bushy hair that seemed to curl in its own profusion. The mouth, so far as I could see it under the heavy mustache, was fixed and rather cruel-looking, with peculiarly sharp white teeth. These protruded over the lips, whose remarkable ruddiness showed astonishing vitality in a man of his years. For the rest, his ears were pale, and at the tops extremely pointed. The chin was broad and strong, and the cheeks firm, though thin. The general effect was one of extraordinary pallor. Hitherto, I had noticed the backs of his hands as they lay on his knees in the firelight, and they had seemed rather white and fine. But seeing them now close to me, I could not but notice that they were rather coarse, broad, with squat fingers. Strange to say, there were hairs in the center of the palm. The nails were long and fine, and cut to a sharp point. As the Count leaned over me, and his hands touched me, I could not repress a shudder. It may have been that his breath was rank, but a horrible feeling of nausea came over me, which, do what I would, I could not conceal. The Count, evidently noticing it, drew back, and with a grim sort of smile, which showed more than he had yet done to his protuberant teeth, sat himself down again on his own side of the fireplace. We were both silent for a while, and as I looked towards the window, I saw the first dim streak of the coming dawn. There seemed a strange stillness over everything, but as I listened, I heard, as if from down below, in the valley, the howling of many wolves. The Count's eyes gleamed, and he said, "Listen to them, the children of the night, what music they make." Seeing, I suppose, some expression in my face strange to him, he added, "Ah, sir, you dwellers in the city cannot enter into the feelings of the hunter." Then he rose and said, "But you must be tired. Your bedroom is all ready, and tomorrow you shall sleep as late as you will. I have to be away till the afternoon, so sleep well and dream well." With a courteous bow, he opened for me himself the door to the octagonal room, and I entered my bedroom. I am all in a sea of wonders. I doubt, I fear, I think strange things which I dare not confess to my own soul. God keep me, if only for the sake of those dear to me. I see my producers in the room. How you doing, producer? Let me have a sip of water. Great book. You get dehydrated fast in this heat, I'll tell you. Again, I'm sorry. My allergies. 7 May. It is again early morning, but I have rested and enjoyed the last 24 hours. I slept till late in the day and awoke of my own accord. When I had dressed myself, I went into the room where we had supped, and found a cold breakfast laid out, with coffee kept hot by a pot being placed on the hearth. There was a card on the table, on which was written, "I have to be absent for a while. Do not wait for me. D." I set to and enjoyed a hearty meal. When I had done, I looked for a bell, so that I might let the servants know I had finished, but I couldn't find one. There are certainly odd deficiencies in this house, considering the extraordinary evidences of wealth which are around me. The table service is of gold, and so beautifully wrought that it must be of immense value. The curtains and upholstery of the chairs and sofas, and the hangings of my bed, are of the costliest and most beautiful fabrics, and must have been of the fabulous value when they were made, for they are centuries old, though in excellent order. I saw something like them in Hampton Court, but there they were worn and frayed and moth-eaten. But still, in none of the rooms is there a mirror. There was not even a toilet glass on my table, and I had to get the little shaving glass from my bag before I could either shave or brush my hair. I have not yet seen a servant anywhere, or heard a sound near the castle except the howling of the wolves. Some time after I had finished my meal, I do not know whether to call it breakfast or dinner, for it was between 5 and 6 o'clock when I had it. I looked about for something to read, for I did not like to go about the castle until I had asked the Count's permission. There was absolutely nothing in the room, book, newspaper, or even writing materials, so I opened another door in the room and found a sort of library. The door opposite mine I tried, but found it locked. In the library I found, to my great delight, a vast number of English books, whole shelves full of them, and bound volumes of magazines and newspapers. A table in the center was littered with English magazines and newspapers, though none of them were of very recent date. The books were of the most varied kind: history, geography, politics, political economy, botany, geology, law, all relating to England and English life and customs and manners. There were even such books of reference as the London Directory, the Red and Blue books, Whitaker's Almanac, the Army and Navy list, and it somehow gladdened my heart to see it, the Law list. Whilst I was looking at the books, the door opened, and the Count entered. He saluted me in a hearty way, and hoped that I had a good night's rest. Then he went on, "I am glad you found your way in here, for I am sure there is much that will interest you. These companions," and he laid his hand on some of the books, "have been good friends to me, and for some years past, ever since I had the idea of going to London, have given me many, many hours of pleasure. Through them I have come to know your great England, and to know her is to love her. I long to go through the crowded streets of your mighty London, to be in the midst of the world and rush of humanity, to share its life, its change, its death, and all that makes it what it is. but alas, as yet. I only know your tongue through books. To you, my friend, I look that I know it to speak. But Count, I said, you know and speak English thoroughly. He bowed gravely. I thank you, my friend, for your all too flattering estimate. But yet I fear that I'm about a little way on the road I would travel. True, I know the grammar and the words, but yet I know not how to speak them. Indeed, I said, you speak excellently. Not so, he answered. Well, I know that. Did. I move and speak in your London. None there, none there are who would know me for a stranger. That is not enough for me. Here I am noble. I am boyar. The common people know me, and I am master. But a stranger is in a strange land. He is no one. Men know him not, and to know not is to care not for. I am content if I am like the rest, so that no man stops if he sees me, or pauses in his speaking if he hears my words. Ha ha, a stranger. I have been so long master that I would be master still, or at least that none other should be master of me. You come to me not alone as agent of my friend, Peter Hawkins, of Exeter, to tell me all about my new estate in London. You shall, I trust, rest here with me a while, so that by our talking I may learn the English intonation, and I would that you tell me when I make an error, even of the smallest, in my speaking. I am sorry that I had to be away for so long today, but you will, I know, forgive one who has so many important affairs at hand. Of course, I said, all I could about being willing, and I asked if I might come into that room when I chose. He answered yes, certainly, and added, you may go anywhere you wish in the castle, except where the doors are locked, where of course you will not wish to go. There is reason that all things are as they are. And do you see with my eyes, and know with my knowledge, you would perhaps better understand. I said I was sure of this, and then he went on. We are in Transylvania, and Transylvania is not England. Our ways are not your ways, and there shall be to you many strange things. Nay, from what you have told me of your experiences already, you know something of what strange things there may be. This led to much conversation, and as it was evident that he wanted to talk, if only for talking's sake, I asked him many questions regarding things that had already happened to me or come within my notice. Sometimes he sheered off the subject and turned to conversation by pretending not to understand, but generally he answered all I asked most frankly. Then, as time went on, and I had gotten somewhat bolder, I asked him of some of the strange things of the preceding night, as, for instance, why the coachman went to the places where he had seen the blue flames. He then explained to me that it was commonly believed that on a certain night of the year, last night in fact, when all evil spirits are supposed to have unchecked sway, a blue flame is seen over any place where treasure has been concealed. That treasure has been hidden, he said, in the region through which you came last night. There can be but little doubt, for it was the ground fought over for centuries by the Wallachian, the Saxon, and the Turk. Why, there is hardly a foot of soil in all this region that has not been enriched by the blood of men, patriots or invaders. In old days, there were stirring times when the Austrian and the Hungarian came up in hordes, and the patriots went out to meet them, men and women, the aged and the children too, and waited their coming on the rocks above the passes, that they might sweep destruction on them with their artificial avalanches. When the invader was triumphant, he fought but little, for whatever there was had been sheltered in the friendly soil. But how, said I, can it have remained for so long uncovered, when there is a sure index to it if men will but take the trouble to look? The Count smiled, and as his lips ran back over his gums, the long sharp canine teeth showed out strangely, he answered, because you're peasant at heart, a coward, and a fool. Those flames only appear on one night, and on that night no man of this land will, if he can help it, stir without his doors. And, dear sir, even if he did, he would not know what to do. Why, even the peasant that you tell me of who marked the place of the flame would not know where to look in the daylight, even for his own work. Even you would not. I dare be sworn, be able to find these places again. There you are right, I said. I know no more than the dead were even to look for them. Then we drifted into other matters. Come, he said at last, tell me of London and of the house which you have procured for me. With an apology for my remissness, I went into my own room to get the papers from my bag. Whilst I was placing them in order, I heard a rattling of china and silver in the next room, and, as I passed through, noticed that the table had been cleared and the lamp lit, for it was by this time deep into the dark. The lamps were also lit in the study or library, and I found that the Count lying on the sofa reading, of all things in the world, an English Bradshaw's Guide. When I came in he cleared the books and papers from the table, and with him I went into plans and deeds and figures of all sorts. He was interested in everything, and asked me a myriad of questions about the place and its surroundings. He clearly had studied beforehand all he could get on the subject of the neighborhood, for he evidently, at the end, knew very much more than I did. When I remarked this, he answered, well, but my friend, it is not needful that I should. When I go there, I shall be all alone. And my friend Harker Jonathan, nay, pardon me, I fall into my country's habit of putting your last name first. My friend Jonathan Harker will not be by my side to correct and aid me. He will be in Exeter, miles away, probably working at papers of the law with my other friend, Peter Hawkins, so... We went thoroughly into the business of the purchase of the estate at Purfleet. When I had told him the facts and got his signature to the necessary papers and had written a letter with them ready to post to Mr. Hawkins, he began to ask me how I had come across so suitable a place. I read to him the notes which I had made at the time and which I inscribe here. At Purfleet, on By Row, I came across just such a place as seemed to be required, and where was displayed a dilapidated notice that the place was for sale. It is surrounded by a high wall of ancient structure, built of heavy stones, and has not been repaired for a large number of years. The closed gates are of heavy old oak and iron, all eaten with rust. The estate is called Carfax, no doubt a corruption of the old Quaker face, as the house is four-sided green with the cardinal points of the compass. It contains in all some 20 acres, quite surrounded by the solid stone wall above mentioned. There are many trees on it, which make it, in places, gloomy, and there is a deep, dark-looking pond or small lake evidently fed by some springs, as the water is clear and flows away in a fair-sized stream. The house is very large, and of all periods back, I should say, to medieval times, for one part of it is stone immensely thick, with only a few windows high up and heavy barred with iron. It looks like part of a keep, and is close to an old chapel or church. I could not enter it, as I had not the key to the door leading to it from the house, but I have taken with my Kodak views of it from various points. The house has been added to, but in a very straggling way, and I can only guess at the amount of ground it covers, which must be very great. There are but a few houses close at hand, one being a very large house only recently added to and formed into a private lunatic asylum. It is not, however, visible from the grounds. When I had finished, he said, I am glad that it is old and big. I myself of an old family, and to live in a new house would kill me. A house cannot be made habitable in a day, and, after all, how few days go to make up a century. I rejoice also that there is a chapel of old times. We Transylvanian nobles love not to think that our bones may lie amongst the common dead. I see not gaiety nor mirth, not the bright voluptuousness of much sunshine and sparkling waters, which please the young and gay. I am no longer young, and my heart, though weary years of mourning over the dead, is not attuned to mirth. Moreover, the walls of my castle are broken. The shadows are many, and the wind breathes cold through the broken battlements and casements. I love the shade and the shadow, and would be alone with my thoughts when I may. Somehow his words and his look did not seem to accord, or else it was that his cast of face made his smile look malignant and saturnine. Presently, with an excuse, he left me, asking me to put all my papers together, He was some little time away, and I began to look at some of the books around me. One was an atlas, which I found open naturally in England, as if the map had been much used. On looking at it, I found in certain places little rings marked, and on examining these I noticed that one was near London, on the east side, manifestly where his new estate was situated. The other two were Exeter and Whitby, and on the Yorkshire coast. It was the better part of an hour when the Count returned. "Aha," he said, "still at your books? Good. But you must not work always. Come, I am informed that your supper's ready." He took my arm, and we went into the next room, where I found an excellent supper ready on the table. The Count again excused himself, as he had dined out on his being away from home. But he sat, as on the previous night, and chatted while I ate. After supper I smoked, as on the last evening, and the Count stayed with me, chatting and asking questions on every conceivable subject, hour after hour. I felt that it was getting very late, indeed, but I did not say anything, for I felt under obligation to meet my host's wishes in every way. I was not sleepy, as a long sleep yesterday had fortified me, but I could not help experiencing that chill which comes over one at the coming of the dawn, which is like, in its way, the turn of the tide. They say that people who are near death die generally at the change to the dawn or at the turn of the tide. Anyone who has, when tired and tied, as it were, to its post, experienced this change in the atmosphere can well believe it. All at once we heard the crow of a cock coming up with preternatural shrillness through the clear morning air. Count Dracula, jumping to his feet, said, "Why, there is the morning again. How remiss I am to let you stay up so long. You must make your conversation regarding my dear new country of England less interesting, so that I may not forget how time flies by us." And, with a courtly bow, he quickly left me. I went into my own room and drew the curtains, but there was little to notice. My window opened into the courtyard. All I could see was the warm gray of the quickening sky. So I pulled the curtains again, and have written to this day. 8 May. I began to fear, as I wrote in this book, that I was getting too diffuse. But now I'm glad that I went into the detail from the first. For there is something so strange about this place, and all in it, that I can't but feel uneasy. I wish I were safe out of it, or that I had never come. It may be that this strange night existence is telling on me. But would that be okay? But would that were all? Okay. If there were anyone to talk to, I could bear it. But there's no one. I have only the Count to speak with, and he, I fear. I am myself the only living soul within the place. Let me be prosaic, so far as facts can be. It will help me to bear up, and imagination must not run riot with me. If it does, I am lost. Let me say at once how I stand, or seem to. I only slept a few hours when I went to bed, and feeling that I could not sleep any more, got up. I had hung my shaving glass by the window, and was just beginning to shave. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and heard the Count's voice saying to me, "Good morning." I started, for it amazed me that I had not seen him, since the reflection of the glass covered the whole room behind me. In starting, I had cut myself slightly, but did not notice it at the moment. Having answered the Count's salutation, I turned to the glass again to see how I had been mistaken. This time there could be no error, for the man was close to me, and I could see him over my shoulder. But there was no reflection of him in the mirror. The whole room behind me was displayed, but there was no sign of a man in it, except myself. This was startling, and, coming on the top of so many strange things, was beginning to increase the vague feeling of uneasiness which I always had when the Count is near. But at the instant I saw that the cut had bled a little, and the blood was trickling over my chin. I laid down the razor, turning as I did so half round to look for some sticking plaster. When the Count saw my face, his eyes blazed with a sort of demonic fury, and he suddenly made a grab at my throat. I drew away, and his hand touched the string of beads which held the crucifix. It made an instant change in him, for the fury passed so quickly that I could hardly believe that it was ever there. "Take care," he said. "Take care how you cut yourself. It is more dangerous than you think it is in this country. Then, seizing the shaving glass, he went on, and this is the wretched thing that has done the mischief. It is a foul bauble of man's vanity. Away with it! And opening the heavy window, with one wrench of his terrible hand, he flung out the glass, which was shattered into 1,000 pieces. Excuse me, pardon me. Which was shattered into 1,000 pieces on the stones of the courtyard far below. Then he withdrew without a word. It is very annoying, for I do not see how I am to shave, unless in my watch case or the bottom of the shaving pot, which is fortunately of metal. When I went to the dining room, breakfast was prepared, but I could not find the Count anywhere, so I breakfasted alone. It is strange that as yet I have not seen the Count eat or drink. He must be a very peculiar man. After breakfast, I did a little exploring in the castle. I went out on the stairs and found a room looking towards the south. The view was magnificent, and from where I stood there was every opportunity of seeing it. The castle is on the very edge of a terrible precipice. A stone falling from the window would fall 1,000 feet without touching anything. As far as the eye can reach is a sea of green treetops with occasionally a deep rift where there is a chasm. Here and there are silver threads where the rivers wind in deep gorges through the forests. But I am not in heart to describe beauty, for when I had seen the view, I had explored further. Doors, doors, doors everywhere, and all locked and bolted. In no place, save from the windows of the castle walls, is there an available exit. The castle is a veritable prison, and I am a prisoner. Quick drink. Chapter 3. And just a quick thing, when I'm done reading today, I have some things to tell you guys about this, because I have experience. It's hard to explain, but yeah, I just have personal experiences to tell you about things like this. Jonathan Harker's journal continued. When I found that I was a prisoner, a sort of wild feeling came over me. I rushed up and down the stairs, trying every door and peering out of every window I could find. But after a little, the conviction of my helplessness overpowered all other feelings. When I look back after a few hours, I think I must have been mad for the time, for I behaved much as a rat does in a trap. When, however, the conviction had come to me that I was helpless, I sat down quietly as I have ever done anything in my life, and began to think over what was best to be done. I am thinking still, and as yet have come to no definite conclusion. Of one thing only I am certain, that it is of no use making my ideas known to the Count. He knows well that I am imprisoned, and as he has done it himself, and has doubtless his own motives for it, he would only deceive me if I trusted him fully with the facts. So far as I can see, my only plan would be to keep my knowledge and my fears to myself, and my eyes open. I am, I know, either being deceived like a baby by my own fears, or else I am in desperate straits, and if the latter be so, I need and shall need all of my brains to get through. I had hardly come to this conclusion when I heard the great door below shut, and I knew that the Count had returned. He did not come at once into the library, so I went cautiously to my own room and found him making the bed. This was odd, but only confirmed what I had all along thought, that there were no servants in the house. When later I saw him through the chink of the hinges of the door laying the table in the dining room, I was assured of it. For if he does himself all these menial offices, surely it is proof that there is no one else to do them. This gave me a fright, for if there is no one else at the castle, it must have been the Count himself who was the driver of the coach that night. This is a terrible thought, for if so, what does it mean that he could control the wolves, as he did, by only holding up a hand in silence? How was it that all the people at Bistritz and on the coach had some terrible fear for me? What meant the giving of the crucifix, of the garlic, of the wild rose, of the mountain ash? Bless that good woman who hung the crucifix round my neck, for it is a comfort and a strength to me whenever I touch it. It is odd that a thing which I have been taught to regard with disfavor, and as Why? And as an idol. Okay, yeah, some of these words are like, 10 feet long. Okay. Disfavor and as an idol. Should be held in a time of loneliness and trouble. Be of help. Is it that there is something in the essence of the thing itself? Or that it is a medium, a tangible help in conveying memories of sympathy and comfort? Some time, if it may be, I must examine this matter and try to make up my mind about it. In the meantime, I must find out all I can about Count Dracula, as it may help me to understand. Tonight, he may talk of himself, if I turn the conversation that way. I must be very careful, however, not to awaken his suspicion. Midnight. I've had a long talk with the Count. I asked him a few questions on Transylvanian history, and he warmed up to the subject wonderfully. In his speaking of things and people, and especially of battles, he spoke as if he had been present at them all. This he afterwards explained by saying that to a boyar, the pride of his house and name is his own pride, that their glory is his glory, and their fate is his fate. Whenever he spoke of his house, he always said we, and spoke almost in the plural, like a king speaking. I wish I could put down all he said exactly as he said it, for to me it was most fascinating. It seemed to have in it a whole history of the country. He grew excited as he spoke, and walked about the room pulling his great white mustache and grasping anything on which he laid his hands on as though he would crush it by main strength. One thing he said, which I shall put down as nearly as I can, for it tells in its way the story of his race. Quote, we Szeklis, I think it's Hungarian, when they put things in Hungarian, it's really weird the way they're pronounced, so I'm going to do my best. Szeklis, the S is silent, have a right to be proud, for in our veins flows the blood of many brave races, who fought as the lion fights for lordship. Here, in the whirlpool of European races, the Ugric tribe bore down from Iceland the fighting spirit which Thor and Woden gave them, which their berserkers displayed to such fell intent on the seaboards of Europe, aye, and of Asia and Africa too, till the peoples thought the werewolves themselves had come. Here too, when they came, they found the Huns, whose warlike fury had swept the earth like a living flame, till the dying peoples held that in their veins ran the blood of those old witches, who expelled from Scythia had mated with the devils in the desert. Fools, what devil or what witch was ever so great as Attila, whose blood is in his veins? He held up his arms. It is a wonder that we were a conquering race, that we were proud, that when the Magyar, the Lombard, the Avar, and the Bulgar, or the Turk poured his thousands onto our frontiers, we drove them back. Is it strange that when Arpad and his legion swept through the Hungarian fatherland, he found us here when he reached the frontier, that the Honoflaglas was completed here, and when the Hungarian flood swept eastward, the Szeklis were claimed as kindred by the victorious Magyars, and to us for centuries was trusted the guardian of the frontier of Turkey land. Aye, and more than that, endless duty of the frontier guard, for, as the Turks say, water sleeps, and enemy is sleepless. Who more gladly than we throughout the 4 nations received the bloody sword, or at its warlike call flocked quicker to the standard of the king? When was redeemed that great shame of my nation, the shame of Kosovo, when the flags of the Wallach and the Magyar went down beneath the crescent? Who was it but one of my own race, who as Voivode crossed the Danube and beat the Turk on his own ground? That was Dracula indeed. Woe was it that his own unworthy brother, when he had fallen, sold his people to the Turk and brought the shame of slavery on them. Was it not this Dracula? Indeed. Who aspired, the other of his race, who in a later age again and again brought his forces over the great river into Turkey land, who, when he was beaten back, came again and again and again, though he had to come alone from the bloody field where his troops were being slaughtered, since he knew that he alone could ultimately triumph. They said that he thought only of himself. Bah! What good are the peasants without a leader? Where ends the war without a brain and heart to conduct it? Again, when after the Battle of Mohawks, we threw off the Hungarian yoke, we of the Dracula blood were amongst their leaders, for our spirit would not brook that were we not free. Ah, young sir, the Seklis and the Dracula, as their heart's blood, their brains, and their swords can boost a record that mushroom growths like the Habsburgs and the Romanovs can never reach. The warlike days are over. Blood is too precious a thing in these days of dishonorable peace, and the glories of the great races are those of a tale that is told. It was by this time close to morning, and we went to bed. Note, memory. This diary seems horribly like the beginning of the Arabian Nights, for everything has to break off at cockcrow, or like the ghost of Hamlet's father. End quote. In parentheses. 12 May. Let me begin with facts, bare, meager facts, verified by books and figures, and of which there can be no doubt. I must not confuse them with experiences which will have to rest on my own observation, or my memory. Last evening, when the Count came from his room, he began by asking me questions on legal matters, and on the doing of certain kinds of business. I had spent the day wearily over books, and simply to keep my mind occupied, went over some of the matters I had been examining at Lincoln's Inn. There was a certain method in the Count's inquiries, so I shall try to put them down in sequence. The knowledge may somehow or sometime be useful to me. First, he asked if a man in England might have 2 solicitors or more. I told him he might have a dozen if he wished, but that it would not be wise to have more than one solicitor engaged in one transaction, as only one could act at a time, and that to change would be certain to militate against his interest. He seemed thoroughly to understand, and went on to ask if there would be any practical difficulty in having one man to attend, say, to banking, and another to look after shipping, in case local help were needed in a place far from home of the banking solicitor. I asked him to explain more fully, so that I might not, by any chance, mislead him. So he said, I shall illustrate. Your friend and mine, Mr. Peter Hawkins, from under the shadow of your beautiful cathedral at Exeter, which is far from London, buys for me, through your good self, my place at London. Good. Now, here, let me say frankly, lest you should think it strange that I have sought the services of one so far off from London, instead of some one resident there, that my motive was that no local interest might be served save my wish only, and as one of London residents might, perhaps, have some purpose of himself or friend to serve. I went thus afield to seek my agent, whose labors should be only to my interest. Now, suppose I, who have much of affairs, wish to ship goods, say, to Newcastle, or Durham, or Harwich, or Dover. Might it not be that it could be with more ease be done by consigning to one in one of those ports? I answer that certainly it would be the most easy, but that we solicitors have a system of agency, one for the other, so that the local work could be done locally, on instruction from any solicitor, so that the client, simply placing himself in the hands of one man, could have his wishes carried out by him without further trouble. But, said he, I could be at liberty to direct myself. Is it not so? Of course, I replied, and such is often done by men of business, who do not like the whole of their affairs to be known by any one person. Good, he said, and then went on to ask about the means of making consignments, and the forms to be gone through, and of all sorts of difficulties which might arise, but by forethought could be guarded against. I explained all these things to him, to the best of my ability, and he certainly left me under the impression that he would have made a wonderful solicitor, for there was nothing that he did not think of or foresee. For a man who was never in the country, and who did not evidently do much in the way of business, his knowledge and acumen were wonderful. When he had satisfied himself on these points of which he had spoken, and I had verified all as well as I could by the books available, he suddenly stood up and said, Have you written since your first letter to our friend Mr. Hawkins, or to any other? It was with some bitterness in my heart that I answered that I had not. That is, yet I had not seen any opportunity of sending letters to anybody. Then write now, my young friend, he said, laying a heavy hand on my shoulder. Write to our friend and to any other and say, if it will please you, that you shall stay with me until a month from now. Do you wish me to stay so long? I asked, for my heart grew cold at the thought. I desire it much. Nay, I will take no refusal. When your master employer, which you will, engaged that someone should come on his behalf, it was understood that my needs only were to be consulted. I have not stinted. Is this not so? What could I do but bow to acceptance? It was Mr. Hawkins' interest, not mine, and I had to think of him, not myself, and besides, while Count Dracula was speaking, there was that thing in his eyes and in his bearing which made me remember that I was a prisoner, and that if I wished, I could have not had a choice anyway. The Count saw his victory in my bow, and his mastery in the trouble of my face, for he began at once to use them, but in his own smooth, resistless way. I pray you, my good young friend, that you will not discourse of things other than business in your letters. It will doubtless please your friends to know that you are well, and that you look forward to getting home to them. Is it not so? And as he spoke, he handed me 3 sheets of notepaper and 3 envelopes. They were all the thinnest foreign post, and looking at them, then at him, and noticing his quiet smile, with the sharp canine teeth lying over the red underclip, I understood as well as if he had spoken that I should be careful what I wrote, for he would be able to read it. So I determined to write only formal notes now, but to write fully to Mr. Hawkins in secret, and also to Mina, for to her I could write in shorthand, which would puzzle the Count if he did see it. When I had written my 2 letters, I sat quiet reading a book, whilst the Count wrote several notes, referring, as he wrote them, to some books on his table. Then he took up my 2 and placed them with his own, and worked by his writing materials, after which, the instant the door had closed behind him, I leaned over him and looked at the letters, which were face down on the table. I felt no compunction in doing so, for under the circumstances I felt that I should protect myself in every way I could. One of the letters was directed to Samuel F. Billington, number 7, the Crescent, Whitby. Another to Erlaubner Varna. The third was to Coutts and Company, London, and the 4th to Herring Klopstock and Bill Ruth Bankers, Budapest. The 2nd and 4th were unsealed. I was also just about to look at them when I saw the door handle move. I sank back in my seat, having just had time to replace the letters as they had been, and resumed to my book, before the Count, holding still another letter in his hand, entered the room. He took up the letters on the table and stamped them carefully, and then, turning to me, said, I trust you will forgive me, but I have much work to do in the private this evening. You will, I hope, find all things as you wish. At the door he turned, and after a moment's pause said, Let me advise you, my young friend. Nay, let me warn you with all seriousness that should you leave these rooms, you will not by any chance go to sleep at any of the other part of the castle. It is old and has many memories, and there are bad dreams for those who sleep unwisely. Be warned. Should sleep now or ever overcome you, or like to do, then haste to your own chamber or to these rooms, for your rest will then be safe. But if you be not careful in this respect, then... He finished his speech in a gruesome way, for he motioned with his hands as if he were washing them. I quite understood. My only doubt was as to whether any dream could be more terrible than the unnatural, horrible net of gloom and mystery which seemed closing around me. Later. I endorsed the last words written. But this time, there's no doubt in question. I shall not fear to sleep in any place where he is not. I have placed the crucifix over the head of my bed. I imagine that my rest is thus freer from dreams, and there it shall remain. When he left me, I went to my room. After a little while, not hearing any sound, I came out and went up the stone stair to where I could look out towards the south. There was some sense of freedom in the vast expanse, inaccessible though it was to me. as compared with the narrow darkness of the courtyard. Looking out on this, I felt that I was indeed in prison, and I seemed to want a breath of fresh air, though, if it were night. I am beginning to feel this nocturnal existence tell on me. It is destroying my nerve. I start at my own shadow, and am full of all sorts of horrible imaginings. God knows that there is ground for my terrible fear in this accursed place. I looked out over the beautiful expanse, bathed in soft yellow moonlight, till it was almost as light as day. And the soft light of the distant hills became melted, and the shadows in the valleys and gorges of velvety blackness. The mere beauty seemed to cheer me. There was peace and comfort in every breath I drew. As I leaned from the window, with my eye was caught by something moving a story below me, and somewhat to my left, where I imagined, from under the rooms, that the windows of the Count's own room would look out. The window at which I stood was tall and deep stone mullioned, and though weather-worn, was still complete, but it was evidently many a day since the case had been there. I drew back behind the stonework and looked carefully out. What I saw was the Count's head coming out from the window. I did not see the face, but I knew the man by the neck, and the movement of his back and arms. In any case, I could not mistake the hands which I had had so many opportunities of studying. I was at first interested and somewhat amused, for it is wonderful how small a matter will interest and amuse a man when he is a prisoner. But my very feelings changed to repulsion and terror when I saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and begin to crawl down the castle wall over that dreadful abyss, face down, with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings. At first I could not believe my eyes. I thought it was some trick of the moonlight, some weird effect of shadow, but I kept looking, as it could be no delusion. I saw the fingers and toes grasp the corners of the stones, wrung clear of the mortar by the stress of years, and by thus using every projection and inequality moved downwards with considerable speed, just as a lizard moves along a wall. What manner of man is this? Or what manner of creature is it in the semblance of man? I feel the dread of this horrible place overpowering me. I am in fear, in awful fear, and there is no escape for me. I am encompassed about the terrors that I dare not think of. 15 May. Once more I have seen the Count go out in his lizard fashion. He moved downwards in a sidelong way, some 100 feet down, and a good deal to the left. He vanished into some hole or window. When his head had disappeared, I leaned out to try to see more, but without avail. The distance was too great to allow a proper angle of sight. I knew he had left the castle, and thought to use the opportunity to explore more than I had dared to as yet. I went back to the room, and taking a lamp, tried all the doors. They were all locked, as I had expected, and the locks were comparatively new. But I went down the stone stairs to the hall where I had entered originally. I found I could pull back the bolts easily enough and unhook the great chains, but the door was locked, and the key was gone. That key must be in the Count's room. I must watch, should his door be unlocked, so that I may get it and escape. I went on to make a thorough examination of the various stairs and passages, and to try the doors that opened from them. One or two small rooms near the hall were open, but there was nothing to see in them except old furniture, dusty with age and moth-eaten. At last, however, I found one door at the top of the stairway, which, though it seemed to be locked, gave a little under pressure. I tried it harder, and found that it was not really locked, but that the resistance came from the fact that the hinges had fallen somewhat, and the heavy door rested on the floor. Here was an opportunity which I might have again. So I exerted myself, and with many efforts forced it back so that I could enter. I was now in a wing of the castle, further to the right than the rooms I knew, and a story lower down. From the windows I could see that the suite of rooms lay along the south of the castle, the windows of the end room looking out both west and south. On the latter side, as well as to the former, there was a great precipice. The castle was built on the corner of a great rock, so that on 3 sides it was quite impregnable. And great windows were placed here where sling or bow or culverin could not reach, and consequently light and comfort impossible to a position which had to be guarded or secured. To the west was a great valley, and then, rising far away, great jagged mountain fastnesses rising peak on peak. The sheer rock studded with mountain ash and thorn, whose roots clung in cracks and crevices and crannies of the stone. This was evidently the portion of the castle occupied by the ladies in the bygone days, for the furniture had more air of comfort than any I had seen. The windows were curtainless, and the yellow moonlight flooding in through the diamond panes enabled one to see even colors, whilst it softened the wealth of the dust which lay over all and disguised, in some measure, the ravages of time and the moth. My lamp seemed to be of little effect in the brilliant moonlight, but I was glad to have it with me, for there was a dread loneliness in the place which chilled my heart and made my nerves tremble. Still, it was better than living alone in the rooms which I had come to hate, from the presence of the Count, and after trying a little to school my nerves, I found a soft quietude come over me. Here I am, sitting at a little oak table, where at old times possibly some fair lady sat to pen, with much thought and many blushes, her ill-spelt love letter, and writing in my diary, in shorthand, all that has happened since I closed it last. It is 19th century up to date with a vengeance, and yet, unless my senses deceive me, the old centuries had, and have powers of their own, which mere modernity cannot kill. Later, the morning of 16 May. I'm going to read till we get to the end of chapter 3 here. Later, the morning of 16 May. God preserve my sanity. For this I am reduced. Safety and assurance of safety are things of the past. Whilst I live on here, there is but one thing to hope for, that I may not go mad, if indeed I be not mad already. If I say, then surely it is maddening to think that of all the foul things that lurk in this hateful place, the Count is least dreadful to me, that to him alone I can look for safety, even though this be only whilst I can serve his purpose. Great God, merciful God, let me be calm, for out of the way lies madness indeed. I begin to get new lights on certain things which have puzzled me. Up to now, I never quite knew what Shakespeare meant when he made Hamlet say, "My tablets quick, my tablets. 'Tis meet that I put it down," etc. For now, feeling as though my own brain were unhinged, or as if the shock had come which must end in its undoing, I turned to my diary for repose. The habit of entering accurately must help to soothe me. The Count's mysterious warning frightened me at the time. It frightens me more now when I think of it. For in the future, he has a fearful hold upon me. I shall fear to no doubt what he may say. When I had written in my diary and had fortunately replaced the book and pen in my pocket, I felt sleepy. The Count's warning came back in my mind, but I took the pleasure in disobeying it. The sense of sleep was upon me, and with it the obstinacy which sleep brings as outrider. The soft moonlight soothed, and the wide expanse without gave a sense of freedom which refreshed me. I determined not to return tonight to the gloom-haunting rooms, but to sleep here, where of old ladies had sat and sung and lived sweet lives, whilst their gentile breasts were sad for their menfolk away in the midst of remorseless wars. I drew a great couch out of its place near the corner, so that as I lay, I could look at the lovely view to east and south, and unthinking of and uncaring for the dust, compose myself to sleep. I suppose I must have fallen asleep. I hope so, but I fear, for all that followed was startlingly real. So real that now sitting here in the broad full sunlight of the morning, I cannot in the least believe that it was still asleep. I was not alone. The room was the same, unchanged in any way since I came into it. I could see along the floor, in the brilliant moonlight, my own footsteps, marked where I had disturbed the long accumulation of dust. In the moonlight opposite me were three young women, ladies by their dress and manner. I thought at the time that I must be dreaming when I saw them, for, though the moonlight was behind them, they threw no shadow on the floor. They came close to me, and looked at me for some time, and then whispered together. Two were dark and had high aquiline noses, like the Count, and great dark piercing eyes that seemed to be almost red when contrasted with the pale yellow moon. The other was fair as can be, with great wavy masses of golden hair and eyes like pale sapphires. I seemed somehow to know her face, and to know it in connection with some dreamy fear, but I could not recollect, at the moment, how or where. All three had brilliant white teeth that shone like pearls against the ruby of their vulpurous lips. There was something about them that made me uneasy, some longing, at the same time some deadly fear. I felt in my heart a wicked burning desire that they would kiss me with those red lips. It is not good to note this down, lest some day it should meet Mina's eyes and cause her pain. But it is the truth. They whispered together, and then they all three laughed, such a silvery musical laugh. But as hard though the sound never could have come through the softness of human lips. It was like the intolerable tingling sweetness of water glasses when played on by a cunning hand. The fair girl shook her head coquettishly, and the other two urged her on. One said, "Go on, you are first, and we shall follow. Yours is the right to begin." The other added, "He is young and strong. There are kisses for us all." I lay quiet, looking out under my eyelashes in agony of delightful anticipation. The fair girl advanced and bent over me till I could feel the movement of her breath upon me. Sweet it was in one sense, honey sweet, and sent the same tingling through the nerves as her voice, but with a bitter underlying the sweet, a bitter offensiveness as one smells in blood. I was afraid to raise my eyelids, but looked out and saw perfectly under the lashes. The girl went on her knees and bent over me, simply gloating. There was a deliberate voluptuousness which was both thrilling and repulsive, and as she arched her neck, she actually licked her lips like an animal, till I could see in the moonlight the moisture shining on the scarlet lips and on the red tongue as it lapped the white sharp teeth. Lower and lower went her head, and as the lips went below the range of my mouth and chin, and seemed about to fasten on my throat. Then she paused, and I could hear the churning sound of her tongue as it licked her teeth and lips, and could feel the hot breath on my neck. Then the skin of my throat began to tingle, as one's flesh does when the hand that is to tickle it approaches nearer and nearer. I could feel the soft, shivering touch of the lips on the supersensitive skin of my throat, and the hand dense, and the hard dents of the two sharp teeth, just touching and pausing there. I closed my eyes in a languorous ecstasy, and waited with beating heart. But at that instant, another sensation swept over me, as quick as lightning. I was conscious of the presence of the Count, and of his being as if lapped in a storm of fury. As my eyes opened, involuntarily I saw his strong hand grasp the slender neck of the fair woman, and with giant's power draw it back, the blue eyes transformed with fury, the white teeth clamping with rage, and the fair cheeks blazing red with passion. But the Count, never did I imagine such wrath and fury, even to the demons of the pit. His eyes were positively blazing, the red light in them was lurid, as if the flames of hellfire blazed behind them. His face was deathly pale, and the lines of it were hard like drawn wires. The thick eyebrows that met over the nose now seemed like a heaving bar of white-hot metal. With a fierce sweep of his arm, he hurled the women from him, and then motioned to the others, as though he were beating them back. It was the same imperious gesture that I had seen used on the wolves. In a voice which, though low and almost in a whisper, seemed to cut through the air and then ring around the room, he said, "How dare you touch him, any of you? How dare you cast your eyes on him when I had forbidden it? Back, I tell you all. This man belongs to me. Beware how you meddle with him, or you'll have to deal with me." The fair girl, with a laugh, of a football coquetry turned to answer him. You yourself never loved. You never loved. On this, the other women joined, and such a mirthless, hard-soulless laughter rang through the room that it almost made me faint to hear. It seemed like the pleasure of fiends. Then the Count turned, after looking at my face attentively, and said in a soft whisper, "Yes, I too can love. You yourselves can tell it from the past. Is it not so? Well, now I promise you that when I am done with him, you shall kiss him at your will. Now go, go. I must awaken him, for there is work to be done." "Are we to have nothing tonight?" said one of them, with a low laugh, as she pointed to the bag which he had thrown upon the floor, and of which moved as though there were something within it. For answer he nodded his head. One of the women jumped forward and opened it. If my ears did not deceive me, there was a gasp and a low wail, as of a half-smothered child. The women closed round, whilst I was aghast with horror, but as I looked, they disappeared, and with them the dreadful bag. There was no door near them, and they could not have passed me without my noticing. They simply seemed to fade into the rays of the moonlight, and pass out through the window, for I could see outside the dim, shadowy forms for a moment before they entirely faded away. Then the horror overcame me, and I sank down into unconsciousness. Okay, that is it for today. Don't go anywhere. I have something to share with you, so just hang in there. Let me turn this thing off. Great book, great book. There we go. Okay, so what a lot of you may not realize is that, thank you. Ooh, it's hot. I'm talking to the ghost. No, is that I'm half Hungarian. I'm a Hungarian Mexican. And Dracula has a soft spot in my heart because the gentleman that played him, Bela Lugosi, in the Dracula movies, was Hungarian. And when I was in college and I was studying, the history of horror film and things like that, I noticed that because we watched this movie and Nosferatu, were the big movies that we watched. And I noticed that, not thinking about it, because growing up watching these creature feature things, I never realized that Dracula was a Hungarian and, all this was going on, or where Transylvania was located. So watching Nosferatu in college, it occurred to me, because I had gone to Hungary twice with my family, because my grandfather, wanted to visit relatives. It occurred to me that everything that was in these movies was in Hungarian. The titles of the buildings, everything. It was all done in Hungarian, and that's when it occurred to me that Dracula was a story based, when they talk about Transylvania, and you could hear him talking about the Magyars in here, was based within Hungary and Transylvania. Okay? So it occurred to me, so I thought it was kind of cool, so I came home, talked to my dad about it. And he said, yeah. He said, Bela Lugosi is Hungarian. And the thing with Bela Lugosi was that when he took over the part of Dracula and started doing it, he couldn't speak English, he spoke Hungarian. And I think that was a lot of the reason, too, that none of those stores and stuff, or, the stuff in the movie itself, were translated to English, because he couldn't read English. So it was all done in Hungarian, to help, even though the area was Hungary anyway, but it was done for him as well, because he couldn't speak English. So when we go to Hungary, and this is before I realized, really sunk in to where Dracula's castle was, and the legendary story, not the Vlad the Impaler part, not Vlad the Impaler part, because there was a gentleman named Vlad the Impaler that got a reputation for war by impaling his enemies' heads on sticks, right? Because that was a big thing to do during medieval times. But Vlad had a castle there, which is Dracula's castle, right? Vlad Dracula. But the location of the castle itself. So we were staying with my cousins in this town called Vertisacha. I hope I said it right. And my dad kind of turned it into a joke, and he goes, "You realize how close we are to the Transylvania border?" He says, "We're only within about 3 or 4 miles from the border." So he was trying to scare me, and it did. For the first few nights I was there, I couldn't sleep because I thought, oh my God, Dracula's going to be coming through the windows and stuff, because this is the area. And that's when it really hit me. I must have been at that point 8 or 9 or 10, for my dad to tell me that. that we were that close to where Dracula's castle was. So that was my big link with this story. And then later on, like I said, when I got into college and realized that Bela Lugosi was Hungarian. But the interesting thing about this too is that even with the movie Nosferatu, which was probably the first vampire movie out, there might have been others, but that's the one they showed us. Everything was Hungarian, there too. All the writing was Hungarian. So I knew that that's where the links were. So it's kind of interesting. That's kind of like my connection to this whole Dracula thing. And my dad would always joke that he had vampire blood in him because he was full-blood Hungarian, and all this as I was growing up. But that's my little link to Count Dracula and Transylvania. I never did get to see the castle. It's there. Tourists can go there. I never did get to see the castle or anything like that. But when they talk about the Habsburg dynasty, saw stuff from them. The stallions of the dancing horses of Vienna and all that. But there's a lot of areas, even in the outskirts of Budapest, where there's still remnants of homes of the Habsburgs and things like that. You can see the stuff still there. There's also some remnants of the Romans there as well. We never got to get up to see that. But we did get to see the Habsburgs, different things for the Habsburgs and stuff, and the Magyars and all that. So yeah, okay, that's my sharing part of my life and my connection to all this, and it's fascinating. That's why I was half tempted when I was talking Dracula's voice to go into that Bela Lugosi kind of thing, with my voice, but I decided to hold back. Okay, tomorrow we have a change of pace at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Reverend Sean Whittington is going to be on tomorrow, and he is an exorcist. And he is in that show, League of Exorcists, and he's come to join us tomorrow for an hour to talk about what he does and why he does it, and some other cases that he's worked on. So he'll be with us tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. I know it's Sunday night, trying to get ready for work and all that good stuff, and I truly, truly appreciate it. I love reading this book. It's a big change from the other stuff I've been reading, so it's more, to me, it's more of a relaxing pace to read it. It's written in a different style, more of an author-writer style. So I'm enjoying that as well. But I want to thank you guys, and if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We appreciate all, we're just trying to get the word out about our little old show. And I'm proud to say that, every month when I look at the numbers at the RSS feed for you guys over in Europe, in different places like that, I like to at least, even if I'm 100 over on downloads from where we were last month, I'm happy. This month we're 1,100 downloads over from where we were last month. So we're growing, and we are growing really fast. And the numbers at YouTube are going up. The numbers at Facebook are going up. The numbers at Twitch are going up. So it's been a nice climb. And so hopefully I can start getting some advertisers and get things going so we can fund this thing and keep it rolling, And then for what's going on right now, I have all of you to thank. Everybody in Europe on the RSS feed, in the U.S. on the RSS feed, everybody who listen live or come back later on to listen to the show and see it live. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And my producers have been nothing short of outstanding. Thank you guys. You know who you are. All right, well, I'll see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Have a great evening, and we'll be talking exorcisms tomorrow. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye. Didn't you upright? Look at that. Have a great rest of your weekend. Come on. Wow, okay. It's playing possum with me. Okay, well, I guess they may not have. Waiting to shut down. Anyway, I'll just keep talking until it decides to do what it wants to do. This is really weird. Just never done this before. A lot of people on the internet I'm noticing. Okay, well, looks like we got a problem. I think we're stuck. Yep, we're stuck. Okay, yeah, let's just stop it right now. So here we go. We have a problem.